With the debate of abortion being very controversial comes an important issue to resolve. What should the United States do with children without homes? Finding middle ground between the two heated and controversial sides of the abortion debate is an important step in making actual progress to help those who need it most, especially children without homes. An important aspect of this middle ground that should be given appropriate attention is the child welfare system. More specifically, is the abuse that occurs and continues to occur within the foster care system. What the United States needs, and more importantly what our children need, is the reform of the child welfare system in order to benefit and protect our children from abuse and/or neglect outside and within foster homes. Reforming the child welfare system is not a new idea at all. In fact, many activists have called for a reform since the 1960s. However, in order to understand the true need for reform, it's important to grasp the formation of our current child welfare system and the history behind it. It began with the first case of child abuse ever recorded in 1874, Mary Ellen Wilson. Mary Ellen Wilson was a young orphan girl when her Irish immigrant father passed away during the Civil War and her mother gave up Mary Ellen as a baby. Shortly afterwards, Mary Ellen was introduced into a world full of abuse and neglect when she was falsely claimed as a niece by a woman named Mary McCormick and her husband, Thomas McCormick. She was only allowed to play outside when it was dark, had no bed or toys of her own, and was the size of an average 5-year-old at age 9. Finally, as nearby neighbors talked of hearing screams of a child coming from within the home, a woman named Etta Engel Wheeler found Henry Berg, an animal rights activist, who then convinced the judge to hear the case and end the abuse. Once in the courtroom, 9-year-old Mary Ellen gave this moving statement on her abuse. "My mother and father are both dead. I don't know how old I am. I have no memories of the time when I didn't live with the McCormicks. The whip always left a black and blue mark on my body. I have now the black and blue marks on my head, which were made by Mama, and also a cut on the left side of my forehead, which was made by a pair of scissors. She struck me with the scissors and cut me. I have no recollection of ever been kissed by anyone. I'd never been taken on Mama's lap and caressed or petted. I've never dared to speak to anybody because if I did, I would get whipped. I don't know for what I was whipped. Mama never said anything to me when she whipped me. I don't want to go back to live with Mama because she beats me so." This statement was successful in removing Mary Ellen from her abusive and neglectful home and in prosecuting her foster parents of child abuse. This case began the movement in the fight for children's rights to a home free of abuse. Around this similar time, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, children living on the streets of New York started to raise concern, so programs such as orphan trains began. These orphan trains sent these orphan children to live with families on farms to help work in exchange for a home, bed, and food. This offered something orphanages at that time could not: a home with a family life. Shortly after orphan trains came the new idea of boarding. Parents who were struggling to house and feed their children could pay another family to care for their child. Though this practice was still informal, many preferred this alternative to orphan trains as questions of overwork, abuse, and exchanging children for labor began to raise concern. It was over the next few decades that these practices began to resemble the formal child welfare system we see today. Despite the obvious negative effects of living in an abusive foster home, even children who do not encounter any type of neglect or abuse while living in the child welfare system experience negative effects. This is due to the fact that many children stay significantly longer in the foster care system than originally intended. Studies show that 56% of children entered into the system stay in the foster care for more than 1 year. Once this temporary out-of-home care becomes long-term, data shows that foster care children are more likely than other children to commit crimes, drop out of school, join welfare, experience substance abuse problems, and/or enter the homeless population. Reducing the length of stay in the system can dramatically improve the chances foster children have at a successful and rewarding life despite the abuse they've endured. After hearing the effects non-abusive foster homes can have on children, it isn't hard to imagine the much worse effects of abusive foster homes. However, attaining accurate statistics on the rate of abuse that occurs within the system is a difficult task, as there are many factors that may skew the results of this research, since this is such a sensitive topic with minimal data. In addition to the lack of strong data, there is a noticeable difference in the report the Child Family Services Reviews release compared to reports from independent and private organizations, as the annual report from these child welfare services tend to understate the true rate of abuse foster children endure. Reasons for this belief is that since Child Protective Services are required to protect and provide children with a safe and temporary foster home, if determined necessary, it is likely that some data may underestimate the reality of these children's experience. So what can we do now? How exactly can we reform a child welfare system that only seems to provide false hope for abused children? One approach is to offer more resources for parents and foster parents involved by providing free and accessible help to parents who have had their children removed from the home, and more resources and training for parents willing to become foster parents, in addition to encouraging more people to consider taking in foster children to minimize shortage and maximize options to provide a better fit for the child and their temporary home. Secondly, and more importantly, is focusing entirely on the children by responding only to the child's needs. This can be done by requiring more home visits by a service worker, allowing the child to become more comfortable with their assigned caseworker, requiring and providing free counseling to children who experience abuse within the system, placing children with siblings in the same foster home, and significantly reducing the time in temporary foster homes after properly reviewing his or her living conditions and determining if this length of stay is absolutely necessary. It isn't difficult to understand the severity of this issue, and it isn't a complicated one to resolve either. It only takes the will and heart of others to put a pause on the back and forth debate of abortion and focus on the middle ground. It's the funding, accessibility of resources, and overall support that our child welfare system needs. It has come a long way since the beginning, however, there is more to improve on. Because what really matters on this issue is the safety and protection of our children, the next generation.